Everyone has a story. They just don't always have a place to share it. Welcome back. This is Jen Lee, creator and host of I Need Blue podcast, True Crime to True Life. As a survivor of armed robbery and abduction, I understand the trauma and triggers survivors experience. Knowing this, and through my powerful podcast, I offer survivors a safe place to share their lived experiences. Survivors need blue to feel they belong, they are loved, understood, and my favorite, empowered. Please note, I Need Blue does contain sensitive topics which could be triggering. Please seek help if needed, and remember, you always come first. I Need Blue episodes can be found on Apple Podcast, Spotify, and many listening platforms, including my website, www.ineedblue.net. There, you will find valuable resources, safety tips, my newly released book and ebook, Why I Survived by Jennifer Lee. I would like to thank Shar Good, the talented violinist who composed and performed this opening music. You can find information about Shar Good on my website. As always, thank you for listening. Let's begin today's episode. Meet Charlie. He specializes in business consulting and development, especially for entrepreneurs and small businesses. He is a story author and co-founder director of the Dreams Come True Charitable Foundation. In his spare time, he is a filmmaker and producer. I will include links in the show notes to learn more about Charlie's successful endeavors. However, what we are talking about today is what you will not find on Charlie's resume. It is an experience he will never forget and rarely talks about. But he is here today to share his recollection of surviving 9/11. With over 25 years of experience on Wall Street, he made many business and personal connections. Today, we will remember those he lost. By sharing, we keep the memories alive of those who perished in such a tragic event. May we remember all those, including the first responders who carry the memories and emotional scars still to this day. Charlie, I appreciate your courage to be my guest today. Your story is going to impact so many other survivors of this horrific, tragic day. Thank you for being my special guest on the I Need Blue podcast.
Thank you for having me here.
Absolutely. I wanted to start this interview asking you, growing up, and you were a child, what did you want to do?
What did I want? It probably changed, every year. But I was recounting the story recently where a lot of times when I was playing games with my friends, and particularly with my cousins, we would play war games or whatever. And I was kind of already directing and rewriting, and there had to be an arc. We have to lose this battle, but then we win the final battle. And I didn't realize it, but I think doing the film thing was probably from an early age something that was in the back of my mind.
You had that creative way of pulling, your thoughts and your vision together and creating a scene.
There had to be scenes, there had to be victories and losses. And basically I was modeling our games on what I was seeing on TV and movies. It was probably annoying to play with me because I had to wait, cut. I wasn't saying cut, but I basically was doing that.
Now, you had made a comment about things that influenced you in regards to what you saw on TV and things like that. How did you go from filmmaking with your friends to financial on Wall Street?
Like a lot of people, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And there was always that struggle in the back of my mind of wanting to make money too and things like that and make sure it was secure. I was trying to go to film school out in California, and my mother was a nurse raising three children by herself. There was a cost concern about me going to an LA film school. I did apply to NYU, which was closer, but I mean, this is kind of how silly little things in life can change everything to you. I was accepted to NYU, but they wouldn't give me a dorm because I lived in Queens. So technically I could commute, but a commute would have looked like me taking a bus to a train to another train and then doing the same thing every night, which really would take hours. The school was encouraging me to get a dorm on my own, get an apartment and with some other people that were in the same situation. But there was no way in the conversation I had with my mom that we could afford anything like that. So I ended up going to Hofstra University in Long Island. They didn't really have a true film department. I ended up being like, okay, I guess business is like if I learn business, I guess that could be applicable. And I ended up meeting my wife in school and have five daughters from that. So if I go to NYU Film School or if I go to UCLA or something, I'm not sitting here probably talking to you right now. Like every little decision, it's amazing how it can affect so many different things.
Boy, you are so right about that. I have to tell you, I've been to New York a couple of times, and fortunately with people who knew their way around, because I'm going to tell you, just looking at the train, all of the lines of this is the A1, the B1, the C1, wherever you want to go. Oh my gosh, I would have been so confused. But I imagine you figure it out. When's the last time you've been to New York?
My mom actually passed away this year, so we were there for that. That's the last time we were there, and we were there for her funeral and kind of taking care of her, selling up her estate, all that stuff. And so that's the last time I've been there.
So I'm sorry for your loss. And again, that's another one of those things that causes life changes, right?
Yeah, she was the backbone of the family, and she was a wonderful person, and really the best person I've ever met. It's a huge loss. It's weird though. I don't know. Maybe I just bury things. I think I tend to, but to me, she's not even really gone. Like I think to myself almost every day, oh, I can't wait to tell my mom this, whether it's good or bad. It's when the best things that happen to me and the worst things happen. I'm like, oh, my mom's going to appreciate this one. And then I'm like, oh, wait a minute. I can't talk to her anymore. It's weird.
Yeah. It's like, not that we take time for granted, but we don't want to really think about when that time will end.
Yeah. Yeah. You never know.
Yeah, for sure. I love that several times now we've talked about how life changes because your path has changed. And there was an event, you surviving 9/11, which really changed your life. We talked a little bit about what it's like to commute in New York. Can you share with me your daily routine when you would go to work?
Yeah. So I was in the bond market, which opens up a couple hours before the stock market. When I first started on Wall Street, we opened the market at 8. Then it moved to like 7:30. Then it moved to 7. I actually left Wall Street about a year ago, but when I left, 6:30 in the morning, you were basically taking orders for the opening, and then we turned the screens on at 7. So for me, I lived about 45 minutes north of the city. I mean, it was probably 28 miles to the city, and then coming in the morning, it took me typically about an hour. I would drive for most of the 25 years that I was doing that commute. Every now and then I would take the train, but the drive was basically an hour, 15-minute drive just because it was so early, leaving my house at 4:45 in the morning. I loved Wall Street. I loved the friends and connections I made, but that commute was killing me. Driving is actually enjoyable to me when I'm moving. When I'm not moving, it's soul sucking.
I understand.
I used to say that to my wife. I was like, yeah, how was the commute? It was soul sucking. It's a soul sucking commute.
I understand. I had a job for probably a year and a half where my commute one way was 2 hours. And you're right. It does affect the quality of your life for sure. But it sounds like all of that aside, you had a routine down, but there was one day where that routine was interrupted by something that you and I would never have imagined. And that was September 11th. Was there anything different that occurred that morning out of your regular routine?
Yeah, and that's honestly, it's. I don't really like talking about it that much, just because one, it's obviously a really difficult day where for many people, and I lost many friends that day, and business associates and close friends, some of my best friends. But on top of that, I did have these kind of series of occurrences that people say to me, "Oh, that was your angels interfering, or they were trying to stop you from going in." And it's hard to accept that a little bit, because I think about my friends that died and like, how come they're. So I don't really like to talk about it. Like, part of it, I didn't want to talk about it many times, because I thought their loved ones, their wives would be like, what is he? It's almost like, but maybe I was just in tune to it, or maybe I was just lucky, maybe it was just dumb luck, but I couldn't find my wallet. I basically going into the city without my wallet, like just getting into the World Trade Center was tough. And it was very important too. Like, when those screens open, we would make 90% of our day in the first half hour or hour, because you'd have all these overnight trains and stuff. So being late is useless. You can miss a day, that's fine, but to be late just makes no sense. But I couldn't find my wallet. I was looking everywhere for it. Somehow, like, I couldn't find my wallet. I couldn't find my ID. I needed gas for the car. I knew I needed gas for the car, things like that. I was tearing the house apart. I think my wife was kind of heard me. I was still thinking I was going to go in, because I went in so early. I still thought I could make it. I actually laid back down in bed at one point to get a breather. Then I found my wallet in my bed. So I was like, okay, I got it. I'm going. So I left. Then the warning light on my car came on. I had low air pressure in one of my tires. I got to go to the gas station. Calculating in my head, I think I might be late. So I ended up bumping this woman that stopped in front of me, blaming the air pressure. Maybe it was my driving. It was literally a tiny tap. But as we got out, we checked it. Then I pull in, I get the air. And then by this point, I had just kind of made up my mind, like, okay, I'm not going in. It's too late. We had got this big tent that had to be returned to a realtor. So there was payphones at this time at the gas station. So I called my wife from the payphone, which I've never done one time ever in my life. And I just said, hey, just so you know, I'm not going to work, but I'm not going to be home when you get up. I'm going to Connecticut to return this tent. So she said, okay. So then I was just driving to Connecticut, country roads. It's beautiful up there. And I don't remember when I first heard about the plane, but I heard it on one of the radio stations. I think I was listening to WNEW, and he mentioned it. I was like, oh, a small plane hit. I was like, oh, I work in that building. That's crazy. One World Trade. They were saying the first tower, which is the tower I was in, One World Trade. And then by the time I got to the realtor and went in, it was being reported that it was, a bigger than that. After that, I was still in the car. I was coming home at that time when the second plane hit. And then I remember thinking, yeah, this is something else. This is not an accident, but people were calling my house like crazy. And the good thing was that my wife knew that I was okay. So she was able to assure people, which from my friends, that were, because of cell phone issues and stuff like that and everything that happened, their wives were calling me all day, and people were calling, and no one could get through to most of them for hours, because there was no service, and phones weren't as efficient as they are now, but also, I guess, because of what was going on. It was a horrible day. I wasn't there. I mean, the people, even everyone from my company, I was at a company called ICAP at the time. Everyone got out except for one girl. We were on the 26th floor, I think, in the tower that was the first tower hit. So they all were able to get out. But even for them, they were traumatized by what they saw, and just the act of leaving the building. Many people never went back, even though they survived. It's hard to be thankful when so many people died and you lost so many friends. And there's a little bit of guilt about it too. Like, oh man, I wasn't there. I felt like I should have been there. And that, feel a little bit of guilt over, not being there. And it's a weird emotion to deal with, to think about.
Yeah, survivor's guilt is, I believe, what you're describing, and everything that you're feeling needs to be validated. I have to imagine when you were getting the phone calls from the spouses, every time that dire feeling inside, that pit in your stomach just kind of grew more and more as you were not able to give them the answer that they were looking for, that you were looking for.
I was trying to be optimistic for everybody at ICAP because of the location. I knew that the plane was above it, and it took quite a while for the tower to come down. But part of the, I don't know what the word is, but part of the difficulty of it is the company that I worked for a year earlier, the crew that I worked with, they were hit directly by the second plane. And so half of them left when the first plane hit, but half of them stayed to man the phones. And it's basically the treasury market, we kind of needed it to be open. They talk about personnel that's key, important personnel. The treasury market needed to stay open. It didn't need to stay open because it actually closed for days, but we felt the need to keep it open. So I'm sure there was a conversation there where, who's going to stay, who's going to go. For one, I was working with those guys, so it's horrifying to think about those people that I was working with. The second plane hit them directly, but my gut instinct is that I would have stayed, and I covered some really important counts. I feel like if I had been with them still and had been in that day, I don't think I would have left. You never know, though, in that moment, especially I don't know what they were seeing outside their windows and stuff like that. But the people that stayed, they stayed because they cared about what they were doing. And, every 9/11, it's difficult.
Yeah, when that day comes around, do you have a routine?
Not really. For a long time after, I would raise a drink at the end of the night to some of my closest buddies and think about them. But that stopped a while ago. And then we had our charity day on 9/11. The 10, 11 years I was at BGC, we did it on 9/11. BGC has the largest charity day for September 11 employees. And now they give to so many other causes too, because they've raised so much money. So that kind of was a nice distraction every 9/11. You'd have all these celebrities at your work, and we've had presidents come in. We had Trump there, and Bush and Clinton all have visited our office, and you got to meet them, and then Yankees and Rangers and all that. So it was a nice distraction, but we would always have those moments of silence at the times of each plane hitting and when they came down, and then there would be a pastor that would come and hold a prayer, and I would try to go to that when I could, if I could pull myself off my desk. So that was really probably was therapeutic for me for many years.
You mentioned the word therapeutic. Is there anything that you did, you sought out therapy to kind of help you deal with what you saw that day on TV, the survivor's guilt, anything like that?
No, I mean, I probably should have. I mean, I would go down there, I'd go down and visit a bunch afterwards, and then we didn't work too far from there. And, I actually got pneumonia probably from the dust, and a bunch of people at my company got pneumonia in the months after it. That was therapy for me to go down and look at kind of the destruction from a distance. You could only get so close, and but other than that, no. My therapy was it probably wasn't good therapy. It was probably, talking about those people over drinks, drinking. Drinking was probably my therapy for many years, dealing with it, I would think, which is probably not good therapy, but it worked to some extent, I think.
I'm going to use a word that you used earlier when you were talking about your mom, which is bury things, right? Sometimes it's easier to bury them and think that they didn't exist, or I didn't feel that, or I don't want to feel that anymore. And then we make the choices that we want, how we want to deal with that. What I visualize right now is you and I both watching this on TV, right? Different locations, obviously. I'm horrified, like just in disbelief, but not personally connected, right? So you can almost separate it as to like, oh, this is like a movie, like, crazy. For you, standing also at a TV watching this, it was a very personal experience that I could never understand. That being said, to someone like me who witnessed it that day without that personal connection, what is something that you would like to share with me that maybe I didn't realize?
I don't know if it's something you didn't realize, but maybe I can give you some insight. Going into like what it was like in the aftermath, obviously, we were like everybody, we were glued to our TV, but it was really like a waiting game all day and night, waiting to hear from everybody and then getting reports of who was okay and then starting to realize who wasn't going to be okay. And really one of my mentors and two of my mentors and two of my best friends, didn't make it out. And that was devastating to me personally. Probably closed myself off for many years from making any new friends. And I think I still do that a little bit to some extent because, when you lose so many people that are close to you, it's like, well, I don't want to experience that again. Like when you open yourself up and to people in a loving, caring friendship, and even, as just we were friends, but, there was more to that, sharing each other's lives and children's lives and triumphs and tragedies. And then to just have it ripped out and many at once, we didn't know how many people died. The number was actually much smaller than I thought it was going to be, but it's amazing how many people that got out and the firefighters that did an amazing job. And then many of them rushed in there. That's on that blows me away. These people that ran into that building knowing they probably knew too that we were probably not coming out of here, but we're going to get as many people out as we can. I remember laying in bed that night. One, I was thinking we were at war. There was that thought like, okay, what's really going on? The skies were closed down as to planes and things like that. But I remember hearing jets screaming up and down the Hudson River all night long, military jets, which you never hear in New York. This was horrible because it was like, why are there jets flying up and down the Hudson? We never hear it. For one, why are they there? Like, what's going on? Is there a war going to happen here? So you're thinking about all that stuff. And then the next day, like just kind of realizing who we hadn't heard from. And I could have probably went to, I don't even know the number, but 100 funerals I could have attended. I was going to like two or three a day at one point. And then I even stopped going to some that I really should. Like I even regret, like, oh man, I didn't go to that funeral. I didn't go to that funeral, but I was like getting numb. I couldn't handle it anymore. And like, I was like, I can't do this. I have some guilt over that. Like not, man, I can't believe I didn't go to that guy's funeral. Like I should have went and told his wife, I'm sorry. It was difficult, I think, also because I was dealing with that guilt of like, okay, I'm okay. And then people kept saying, oh, tell your story, how you didn't make it in that day. And I'm like, no, I'm not telling, because to me, it was the wife would say, well, why didn't that happen to me? Why didn't that happen to my husband? So I really kind of like this. I kind of suppressed the story for a long time, but well, I'm thankful it happened, whether it was, angels or just dumb luck, me not taking good care of my car. I mean, if I took better care of my car, I might not be here right now. Yeah, but
Yeah. I think it's very normal to look back and play the what if game. It's part of the survivor's guilt, but also you carried a lot of grief. And I haven't studied enough on grief to fully understand it, but I know that that is a tough emotion to deal with and a tough emotion to process and work through. It is possible, but it's tough. Do you still grieve?
I mean, I just, I started feeling a lot of pain when we were just discussing, the funerals. So I guess so, when I think about it, but I do because I feel like, and I can only imagine what their families feel like, but I feel like, I lost some really special friendships that were people that you kind of started with on Wall Street and went through a lot together. And there were so many good memories in such a short time with them. It's like what could have been. So I think I do grieve at times, but mostly when I think of those people, I'm laughing and thinking of fond memories, honestly. Like we talk about, oh, remember when he did this or remember when he did that. And a couple of them were real characters, real like legendary people that I looked up to and other people looked up to. And they were just, one of a kind people.
I have to imagine somewhere in there you look back and you say that you were blessed to have them in your life, even if it wasn't as long as you wanted them to be there.
Yeah, I mean, this stuff happens to people all the time. It's just that this was a mass event. It's so senseless. It's just like what kind of evil people like do this stuff. It's really hard to fathom sometimes, but this has been going on to all of history. Man can be pretty bad. Man can be pretty bad sometimes. It's easy for us to condemn ourselves for things we've done wrong in life, and nobody's perfect and you make a lot of mistakes. But, you think about this kind of stuff, people that do things like this and kill for no reason, and, different events in history. It makes it easier to forgive yourself for your shortcomings when you think about these people and how they get so confused to think that they're doing right too. That's the thing too. It's understandable.
Right. I want to slowly transition out of this, and you're doing great. I have to tell you, I just want to reaffirm that. And I can hear like the grief and the pain in your voice. So I wanted to share that. But I guess my last question in regards to the event, and it's more so about today. Do you have triggers?
I don't think so. I don't think I do. I'm trying to think. I mean, I'm just trying to analyze myself and see if I do. I really don't think I do.
Mm-hmm.
My answer, yeah, I'm going to say no, but I'll say this. I haven't watched any of the thick, like the Tom Hanks movie and stuff like that. I obsessed on it for 2 weeks after September 11th, where I watched everything. And then I wouldn't watch anything about it for probably at least a decade. I wrote a film, and then I wrote a short story that is in a book. This a book of short stories that I recently just released in ebook form, but I'm going to be releasing it as a book eventually. And those were therapeutic for me. And I think after I wrote the film, I was able to start watching some things about it again and stuff. But to answer the question, yeah, I think I was triggered by anything that came on. And of course, and I can't blame them, but my wife and, my children, they all wanted to watch everything about it. It was an important event for them. They were able to process it, but I couldn't process it. I didn't want to, see it. I avoided like looking at the hard facts of the tragedy and the terror that those people experienced, because, it was really terrible for many of them. The people that, were jumping out of the building and things like that.
Right. Yeah, there are scenes you'll never forget. I want to transition out of this because I can feel your emotions, but I want to make sure there is not anything that you wanted to mention about that day that I missed.
No, I think you did a good job covering it, and thank you. This is like probably a therapy session for me. Therapy session number 1.
I want to share something with you before we get into your filmmaking and things like that. And I stare at this every day. I'm going to read it to you as I put it right here in front of me because I really felt that it would bring you some comfort. I had a friend, a guest of mine, who put this on Instagram, and I immediately printed it off and framed it, and I look at it every day. And it says, when you stand and share your story in an empowering way, your story will heal you and your story will heal somebody else. And I want you to know that. I find a lot of comfort in that. So I brought it in here with me today.
Well, thank you. That does make you feel, meeting you and then deciding to, talk about it in a public forum. I do think it was time, and you have a very gentle, quiet nature about you. And it seemed like it made sense to me. And I don't think I'll probably ever talk about it again in public, but I do hope at some point that I can maybe tell a little bit of my story, in some other way. And doing, like I said, doing the things that I'm doing, I think have been therapeutic in some way.
Yes. Well, and down the road, if there's anything I can do to help you, by all means, reach out. Even if it's just that you need a sounding board or whatever that may be. I think I've been gifted this ability to bring about a calming nature within people, and I'm thankful for that. But also, as somebody who's been through their own stuff, I kind of understand that feeling inside of the your stomach hurts. You feel like you can't breathe, like all of those things that you go through when you want to share your story. And I describe it as I'm definitely challenging my comfort zone because it's hard for me to get up and talk. But when I do, it might be that day, it might be months later, somebody will reach out to me and be like, I saw you share your story and I'm ready to share mine. So even if you never hear from anybody, because most of the time I don't, what I just read to you is true, is absolutely true. So thank you.
Thank you.
So let's move on then to where you are today and how you took that youthful experience and dream that you had. You are a filmmaker and a producer. And that fascinates me. I have a podcast to share messages and stories, and you use your talent to create film. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I always kind of wanted to get into film. It was, and I love film. Most of my training, film training, is just watching film over and over, and watching all the greats, and watching, foreign films and different things that maybe are different than other people. And that was my true training. I mean, I've done different programs, film programs and stuff to learn some of the technical things I needed. But I feel like the great filmmakers, guys like Scorsese and Tarantino and stuff, and not to compare myself to them at all, because I'm not in their league and I kind of worship the ground they walk on. But they're great filmmakers because they've watched every film. And not only that, you talk to them and they can tell you about shots in the film and different things, like some obscure film you never heard of. It's pretty amazing. So I just love films. It was just something I always wanted to do, but like anything, you get caught up with life, and I'm having success on Wall Street. I'm giving my children a nice upbringing and a nice home, and able to do things for them that I wasn't able to do maybe for myself, even as when I was growing up. At some point, though, I just was like thinking about it. It was in the back of my mind always, but probably was never going to happen. Then actually, the first thing that like kind of catalyzed it, my kids were playing a game of Ghost in the Graveyard, which is this kid's game. And I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it's kind of like reverse tag, where the person who's it is the ghost, and the people hide, and the ghost comes and sings this creepy song. And I had never played it growing up in the city. It wasn't a city game. I think it was more of a country woods game. And my kids were playing it in the backyard. My wife had taught them, and it was creepy. Like, it was scary. Like, the kids were doing this chant in the woods, and it was getting dark and you couldn't really see. Kids were running around screaming. And I said to my wife, with glass in hand, hey, someone should make a movie about this. And literally the next day I took out a book and I wrote Ghost in the Graveyard 1, 2, 3, Echoes Through the Woods. And then that was the start of a journey that took me 10 years from that first moment where I put down that word to get the film made. A lot of people helped and along the way, and I took classes at NYU, went back to NYU at night, and then I went to Dub Simmons Film School, all the stuff to learn what it takes to make a movie. And we shot a teaser in my backyard at my house. We showed that to investors. We raised the money, and then we shot the movie. And I actually left Wall Street for 6 months to shoot the movie. It was the hardest 6 months of my life. It was really a very difficult process, emotionally, artistically, monetarily. I was in way over my head on everything, made many mistakes in the film. I have so many regrets. I would love to shoot it again. Like, I'm proud of what we made to an extent, but there was like holes in the story and stuff like that. When you're shooting a low budget film, and also you haven't planned things out, maybe if I had more experience, you have a location and you shoot everything and you run out of time at that location. To go back to location to get what you need, there's a huge cost. Like, here's actually a good example. We ended up having like Jake Busey in the movie, and who was a semi-famous. He was Gary Busey's father, and he's in a ton of stuff. He was in Stranger Things most recently, and he's in The Predator, and he was in. I mean, he's pretty well known. He played the father in the film. he was getting paid. So we had him for like 4 days, and we had to shoot every scene with him in 4 days. And I've heard them doing this with actors doing it in one day, but we got four, which was a luxury. And we flew him in from LA and everything and shot his stuff. But the last day of filming, and we're filming in a graveyard at night from like 8 o'clock at night to 6 in the morning. And we're setting up at 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock to start at 8 o'clock. And it was miserable. It was the coldest winter ever in New York. And we're low budget. He's not used to the conditions. He's used to having a nice trailer and all that stuff. And we had like some bands and something to get into, but it wasn't what he was used to. It snowed. So we're shooting all this stuff. So it looks amazing on film. But what people don't realize is when you do that, I've got 20 other scenes that are coming after that in the movie, and there's got to be snow in those scenes. And so, of course, that snow, it melted in the morning. Again, epic footage. And then it went from being the coldest winter ever to the warmest winter ever. We never got a sniff of snow again. And we've got all these scenes we have to shoot with no snow. That doesn't make sense. So we had to shoot the rest of the film that hadn't been shot yet. We bought basically every bag of salt within a 20-mile radius to place on the set. Like we had a giant truck of salt. And even when you spread it out, it took hours to do, it barely looked like there was any kind of snow. It just like there was a spattering. So we had to shoot everything with the camera basically on the ground, looking up at the actors after that so that you couldn't see any landscape, which is not ideal. So these are the kind of things that you're dealing with. It was a massive challenge, but we did it. And then I got to do a bunch of other stuff because of that, made some connections and was able to produce some other films. And Rub, that just came out a week ago and is getting amazing reviews, getting some bad reviews too, that was probably the hardest thing at first, is like, especially with Ghost in the Graveyard. And we marketed Ghost in the Graveyard as a horror film, but it really wasn't a horror film. I'd say it was a ghost story with heart. There's a couple of creepy moments, but not really scary. If they're expecting a horror film and they don't get a horror film, they will rip you to shreds. And so I got pretty ripped. I won Best Director at a film festival, but I also was told I should never direct again. You have to separate yourself from that.
Yeah. Well, that was also your passion. It was your passion to be a filmmaker as well, and not your job per se, right?
Yeah. But ideally, if it had blown up, but it did okay, maybe I would have done it full time. Maybe it would have become the full time thing. I did look at it as a chance to transition to a full time career as a filmmaker. Now, that didn't happen. I did have to go back to Wall Street for years and years. And what I'm doing at J. Galt, helping small and medium-sized business get funding on their business, which is so needed, especially now, and people don't know anything about that credit space. But I love what I'm doing. I'm not going to stop doing that no matter what. But ideally, I'd be doing the filmmaking, really full time and doing the J. Galt thing in conjunction with him. If Rub blows up, who knows? We were able to make Rub at a cheap enough point that we're going to make another film probably the next year. It's just a matter of, finding the time and everything, the right story.
And what do you want people to know about that production?
About Rub?
Yes.
Honestly, I was very nervous when we spoke initially about the perception of the audiences to it, because the content is very raw. The director is a middle-aged male, and he wrote it and directed it. There was that concern that was voiced by other people, even that, that could become an issue. We might get critiqued for what we wrote. I mean, we didn't pull any punches at all. The film is revolving around the sex trade, and it's also revolving around this male that's got some issues. And I'm very pleased that the critics were able to see that just because the lead character says something, it doesn't mean that's our opinion, right? But there are a couple of critics who've not been able to separate our film from us, or didn't like the message that was being sent. We live in a world right now where you have to be very careful about the way you phrase things and things like that. But it is a film that does deal with mental health. It's been called an incel culture film, and the main character is basically a loner who most of his interaction is with computers, and he's socially awkward and is not good at work interacting with people, although some people do like him because he's generally a good person. He does feel awkward in social situations and groups, and he's awkward around women. And it's affecting him mentally. I think it is an issue in society with phones and computers and things like that. And his best relationships are with women online sexually and dating services and things like that, but he has no success with that. And then eventually it leads him to a massage parlor where there are these women that are, sex workers, illegal aliens that are forced to be doing what they're doing. Some people aren't always forced, but maybe they feel they have no choice because there's nowhere to turn and they don't have the money and they're desperate too, and they're doing it. So there was like some important, subject matter in the subtext of the film. So we were nervous that we could be attacked for our viewpoint, but that's one of the things about being a filmmaker. You open yourself up as an artist to critique and criticism, and it's got amazing reviews and won a bunch of awards. And the director is the one who receives the brunt of it. Writer director, that's the worst. People are really harsh. Like, I think there's a whole posse of people out there that just go out, like they just spend all their time going out and ripping films to shreds. It's kind of a shame. That's the world we live in.
Absolutely. I have not seen the film, but when you were talking about, it's almost like isolation because of our computers and dating apps and things like that. It's all accessible just sitting at home. There have been topics around loneliness, especially with the younger generations, because they've become so dependent upon their phones, email, texting, Snapchat, all of that other stuff, which does lead then to mental health. So I think the fact that you bring that about in your film is something that is a reality for a lot of people.
A lot of that is the heart of the film. And Chris had a couple things he was trying to say, I think, Mr. Chris Fox, the writer-director, but that was one of them. And it's certainly a big part of the beginning of the film. And we get to see his isolation and loneliness and mental state, that it was affecting his mental state. And he's kind of bullied and ridiculed at work too, which is also a thing, and it's much less of a thing now in the workplace, thank God, because they're very sensitive to it. But it's something that exists in areas other than the workplace, in sports teams and schools and things like that. And so even though we're showing a workplace bullying, people that do that and team up on other people, it's wrong and it should stop. He made some beautiful points in the movie. It's an intense film. I would warn anybody. There's some sexual content, some drug use, and things like that. So don't watch it with your 12-year-old or something. I don't know. Well, I don't know. I used to go to movies when I was 12 that I probably shouldn't have too. But I careful. If the kiddos are around. But it's really really proud of the film.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing all of that information. Is there anything you would like to add to our conversation today that maybe I forgot to touch upon?
No, I think we covered everything.
Okay, fair enough. Charlie, I thank you for being my guest today on the I Need Blue podcast.
Thank you. I thank you. And thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening today. This is Jen Lee with the I Need Blue podcast. You can find out everything about I Need Blue on my website, www.ineedblue.net. And remember, you are stronger than you think.